Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from central British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us, you say, oh, we know where Canada is in British Columbia on the west coast, right? Right. And we are in the center of British Columbia, one of the most beautiful provinces in Canada. And so today's guest is a very interesting guest. His name is Garrett Wood, a clinical hypnotherapist, sorry for bearing with me, executive functioning specialist and founder of Gnosis Therapy. He works with executives, founders, and entrepreneurs who want sustainable high performance without threatening health or relationships. Very, very interesting comments, obviously. Garrett, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
So give us your background in terms of your studies, how did you get to, and help me with
Therapy.
yeah, how did you, I can't even spell it, let alone, and I looked at it a little bit in terms of, explain it to us also what it is, but maybe give us some of your background first.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was a kid, I didn't dream of growing up and becoming a hypnotherapist. I kind of came to it the way a lot of people do, where they start off on the receiving end of the service before they're actually on the providing end. I was in a stressed out position in my life, worked a lot of hours. It was a hospitality industry. We focused on health and wellness, helping other people get theirs up. But we were sacrificing our own to kind of make that happen. Long hours, early morning, lots of people, lots of personalities. It was great work. I was passionate about it, and some of that passion kind of turned into a little bit too much of passion into that obsession piece.
Right.
And so I was sacrificing a lot of my own self. So I looked into sleep. Seems like the more you sleep, the better you are. People talk about fitness being made in the gym or in the kitchen. It seems like it's actually made in the bedroom. So instead of trying to commit to 3 extra hours of sleep at night, I was looking for shortcuts. How do I get more high quality sleep in less amount of time? And it seemed like hypnotherapy.
Sleep faster, you mean?
Sleep quality. Like how do you get to that REM, those deep stages sooner? Yeah.
Tongue in cheek, when I say this, sometimes you say to me, how do you do all this? You must only sleep 4 hours. I know, I say I sleep faster.
Yeah. Get more done in less time, right?
Yeah. But I agree with you, that my practice is, I always say, I have to sleep between 7 and 9 hours a night, and that's what I try to do, and then quality sleep preferably, and especially being 85. I just turned 85 2 weeks ago. I call it 85 years young.
Yeah.
Okay, I interrupted you, so go further with it.
Yeah, so at that time, it seemed like hypnotherapy, when you're in that state, it restores some of the things that you get when you're in a sleep state. They have similar properties to them. So I was interested and curious enough to look up someone and go book 12 sessions and see what it was all about. And at the end of those 12 sessions, I was like, okay, interesting. But then 90 days later, at the end of that next quarter, we got our P&Ls back and everything was better. My sleep was better. My back pain was better. My relationships were better. My relationships at work were better. And then even more importantly, that ripple out effect, the people that I was in charge of and leading, their lives were better. So it seems like I was kind of the bottleneck. It's my stress, my frustration.
So your stress was the bottleneck for you, and then the other comment that you made is not in the kitchen, not in exercise, but in the bedroom, meaning more sleep. Make changes to you in terms of not only more sleep but likely quality of sleep. Then
100%.
maybe explain that to us, what it really means.
Yeah, I think a lot of people understand that they shouldn't get behind the wheel when they've been having one too many drinks. But there's actually evidence out there that if you're sleep deprived, it's just as dangerous, if not more so, for motor vehicle accidents. And that's for those big pieces of machinery. But most of us out there, besides yourself, doing your 9 hours, which is great. Cheers to you. It's so important. They're getting 6 hours or less. They're only in bed for 6 hours. And how many of that are they actually in that deep state of sleep? And then their cognitive function declines, their emotional bandwidth Their emotional regulation skills diminish. Their ability to be present diminishes. But there are some other bad news. When you're sleep deprived like that, your ability to experience pain goes up. Your ability to experience negative emotions goes up. So we start clouding this kind of worldview with that lack of sleep, and it turns into pretty cynical and exhausted and overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember I was born in Holland and had experience there before I came to Canada when I was 24. And even in Canada, I remember like even in our companies, we have trucks that drive. In Holland already, I got exposed to it that they were very strict about the amount of hours that somebody could drive a truck, and they had to be very meticulous about the timing between point A, point B, making sure that it was done correctly. The same in Canada, and I presume the same in the United States, likely, because once you drive these huge, big trucks and you fall asleep, which could well happen, it could be disastrous.
For you, for everybody, yeah, it's a big, dangerous piece of equipment. We got to treat it as such, sorry. But the ability to do that is dependent upon your own sleep deprivation, your own awareness. And I know in college, there was a lot of friends who were like, no, I'm fine to drive because they were so impaired, they couldn't see their own impairments. And the same thing happens with sleep. If we're sleep deprived, we get so accustomed to it, we don't notice our loss in cognition. And we just feel like that's how the world is. We don't realize that our perception is skewed by that sleep deprivation.
So between my wife and myself, usually what happens to me that when I go to bed, usually around 9 o'clock, 9:30 is at the latest, and then I wake up at 5:30 like clockwork. I mean, I don't even have a clock, but I wake up at around 5:30. So when I lay down, I'm gone. So my wife is different. It takes her 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and then watching, and as we lay in bed on the television under the not having the sound on, but reading it, and so then when I wake up, sometimes just for a minute, you just go to the bathroom for a minute, then I said, "Are you still awake?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay." But so is that the example? What is the difference other than the obvious, likely? But I usually have no issue or problems to go to sleep. Although I'm in a very stressful environment a lot of times in the companies and then doing a lot of other stuff, but I can. Is it part of it? Sometimes I wonder if it is part. I'm also ADHD and dyslexia, as you noticed, and so is it all part and parcel of all of this?
Well, actually, a lot of people with ADHD have bouts with insomnia. They have a hard time. They have a challenging relationship with sleep. So the fact that you have ADHD and you don't, you are able to get deep restorative sleep just like that. That is an anomaly. You might be an outlier there, which is great. Because
Oh,
sleep
I
is so
like it.
important. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah. But a lot of people with ADHD, they have a hard time getting their mind to turn down at the end of the day without turning to something like TV or reading a book or listening to a podcast,
right,
because then those thoughts aren't their own, they're someone else's. So it makes it easier to make that transition.
right. So take us back then to where you then went and studied, the specialty that you're doing, and then brought it in to become and to create a company, Gnosis Therapy. So, what brought you to the therapy specialty that you do, and then started up into? You indicated in the introduction that you were not sure which direction to go, and then stress was part of all of this, and that was then that you went to a clinic of some sort for a period of time that had the effect of changing direction as to what you thought this was to where it became something that had your interest and it became your specialty.
Yeah, I was so impressed with the results that I felt, and seeing how much it affected everybody else. It kind of changed my perspective. Here in the States, we have a pretty strong myth of success requires sacrifice, and that the more you sacrifice your own health and well-being in the pursuit of that success, the more likely you are to become successful. And I had been bought and sold in that for most of my life, and always trying to find that line of where is too much and not enough. Uh, but I now am of the mind that true, sustainable, lasting success is built through your well-being, not at its expense. And some of that comes from this idea that if you're not okay, everything you touch isn't going to be okay. You're not getting your 9 hours of sleep. It's harder for you to show up and take those 5 flights of stairs up. It's harder for you to show up and be present with people and make that connection. And I think a lot of times we miss that short-sightedness of trying to get through that next quarter, that next day, and then we end up sacrificing something.
Yeah, interesting, Garrett, because, as I indicated at 85, I believe that to me, what is the most important is quality of life. Mentally, physically, all the things that I do. And in fact, I wrote a book about it, Living Young, Dying Old. And, diet is important, fitness is important. That's a picture of me, actually. I'm also the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. And started that when I was older already. I had a case of diverticulitis at one point in 2008. And for those people that are wondering what it is, I'm not a doc, obviously, but when people say in a general sense, I have pain on my right side, could well be the appendix. On the left side, it could potentially be colon or diverticulitis related. In my case, it breached and the toxins go through your body and start attacking other organs. And so it is fairly critical within 48 hours that you have somebody attend to it. So I waited too long, got to the hospital, got an operation, and they took 20 centimeters out of my colon. And, in the following morning when I woke up, the doc came up and said, you came this close. So that got the message to me in 2009, when I was already 69 years old, that I have to become more serious about diet and exercise. And so I decided to, my wife is a vegetarian, and so to become more conscious, listen more to her, although I was not bad, but so then I became what I call 90-10 or 80-20 and gradual to the 90-10. That's what I do now. I hired a trainer to work with me on physical exercise. So in 2009, when I had recovered from the serious operation that I had, I went to the gym. And after 6 years in the gym, somebody came up to me and said, hey, John, have you ever thought about competing? I said, me? Yeah. And then I said, why not? Gives me a goal. So that's what I did. Then already in my mid-70s, I started competing in 2017, 2018, bodybuilding physique in Northern BC. Came in second bodybuilding, third in physique. That qualified me for the provincials. And doing the same, that qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. And then COVID came. And then, so I still trained, but not in the setting that I was used to. And now again, I'm training for the Arnolds in 2026. And so this is what I look like today in my mid-80s. And I'm very, very conscientious of all the things in terms of physical exercise, diet, obviously. The other thing that I do, and I usually say I sleep 7 to 9 hours a day. Every morning when I wake up, I have 10 ounces of water, and then I'm very careful about my diet. I usually have 4 boiled eggs, and then I have an avocado. At lunchtime, a protein drink, and then in the evening, more protein in the finished, and then again, as I said, so that's basically what I do. And stay active and do all the things that I do. And a lot of people say to me, how do you do all this stuff? Written 6 books and then have 10 different companies and then obviously do podcasting and all the. And they say, "How do you do it?" I said, "ADHD. That's how I do it."
A great answer. Yeah, a little bit of everything, the scatter, the passion.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
it. And to be able to make those changes well past midlife to create a whole new persona of becoming a bodybuilder and a new passion, it's amazing. At such a different age.
And the interesting part about it, Garrett, and you can relate to that because that's what you do, is saying that everything is possible at any age. That is always too quickly we, meaning people in a general sense, make a decision. No, I'm too this, I am too old, and I'm too this, and all the other things. No, you're not. So everything is possible once you make the commitment to do it. But there is nothing more important that, and I'm somewhat of an example of that. If I can do this at 85 years old, not only being active in the companies that I do, I'm not talking about money now, that's not important to all of this, but simply exercise, fitness, and for me is that neurodiversity issues, obviously part of my life, ADHD and dyslexia, that I became successful not in spite of it, but because of it. And that's what I believe. And then having a positive attitude. So my foundation is attitude, passion, work ethic. What will follow is success. But and anything can be done at any age once you make the commitment. But you don't have to become an Olympian or a bodybuilder, like I do. But have exercise of your brain, your body. Be conscientious of diet, don't abuse it. Your body is immensely forgiving, but you can only abuse it for so long. And then, then things become much more difficult and delicate.
It's amazing how resilient the body is and how much it can adapt at any age to whatever you're putting in front of it, right?
Exactly. So take us further then in your specialty, and you say that when you formed the clinic, or not the clinic, but the specialty, and the founder of the Gnosis Therapy. Do I say that correctly, the name?
Yeah. Gnosis Therapy, you got it.
Yeah. And so you're focusing in particular on executives and entrepreneurs, who want to sustainable high performance without trending on health or relationships. And that's quite a package, and all those things have been part of my life and still are as we speak, being very active. So
absolutely,
what do you do with individuals, identifying them in this grouping, and how do you go about it, saying in the first, through meetings that you have, either in person or virtual, I presume? How do you go about it?
Yeah, there's a lot of things like you talked about: diet, exercise, sleep, nutrition, relationships, passions, positive emotions, mindset. There's all those kind of big movements of what well-being encompasses. There's that PERMA model: positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning and achievements, plus health, mindset, fitness. Those are all pretty big cornerstones that people need to be able to have a full, robust, fulfilling life. And what's interesting is the more that they have, the easier it is to perform at a high level for long. A lot of times we think about sacrifice as what we have to do to perform well, but it's not. If you're leaning into those things of well-being, performance comes out of that as a result of it. So it's almost like putting it in the universe. So for a lot of people, we look at, to make it simple, we go, okay, what are actually going on? Who are you? So we do a bunch of assessments on that. And then we go, okay, great. These are your own unique nervous system needs. This is how you respond. Like having ADHD, you have different executive functioning strengths than others. If we don't account for that and we use some off the shelf advice to get you to go out and do something, but it doesn't quite fit the way you work best, there's going to be a lot of friction and effort there. And people are disciplined and they can use their mind over matter and focus and get through it, but it usually ends up costing them something. Versus kind of the path you laid out for yourself, you're not resisting your ADHD tendencies, you're leaning into them. And because you're able to do that, you're leveraging when they were against. And so we kind of try to affect that through a very formal process of assessment, understanding how to accommodate it just like you have, and then aligning their efforts in a way that actually helps.
So usually what I say about, it took quite a while for me to discover ADHD was part of my life, although academically I was not a success story. I failed grade
Mm.
3, I failed grade 7 3 times in Holland.
Wow.
And then they say to my parents, who were beautiful people, they said, what are you going to do with this guy? And some people suggested send him to the mentally challenged school. They said, no, we're not doing that.
Mm.
And so then said, well, let's kind of find him a trade where he can work with his hands. And then my grandfather was a master carpenter and my dad was in lumber. They said, well, maybe make him a furniture maker. And so that's what they did when I was 12 years old, 12 and a half, actually, went to a furniture factory. And then the other part, to just kind of throw it into the story that is important in terms of what put me into a position where I always was challenged saying, who am I? Because
Mm.
all the other friends that I had that were in grade 7 with me that went to colleges or universities were very successful and all the things they did and kind of looked down on me as a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then was kind of looked down on. And then the other part, as you already noticed, I was born in 1940, the start of the Second World War, saw far too much that we should not have seen, all of those stuff. And then we were liberated by the Canadian Army April the 12th, 1945. And at 5 years old, made a real impression on me. And I knew from that point forward that when I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And I did. And then the other part was that I always liked lumber. And my second part of my dream was to start a lumber mill in British Columbia, Canada, where all the trees are. And so I did that when I was 65, started with nothing, went to,
Wow.
with my suitcase, but still wondering, who am I? And so wanted to start with nothing, a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and then flew into Montreal, took the train across Canada, 4 days, 5 nights. My God, that is a long way. So then landed in Vancouver and couldn't speak English, didn't know soul, didn't have a job, as I said. And fortunately, there was a German fellow that I could speak a little bit of German. And so I told him I want to build a lumber mill. He said, go to Prince George, British Columbia. It's 500 miles north of Vancouver, or 800 kilometers. That's where I am today. We work all over the province in North America, but I still have a studio here in this location. I can still see where the Greyhound station used to be. Came off the bus with my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had $25.47.
Mm. Mm.
But what I did have is attitude. I've always been positive, still am today. If you're negative, every day to me is a good day, and don't even come close to me if you're a naysayer, everything is bad. So passion, whatever I do, I give it 125%. And the third one is work ethic. I work harder than anybody around me that I know. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And so, and yes, I did build a lumber mill and all of those kind of things. But the other part that made an impact on my life, I was already here for 32 years in 1997. And so, and I picked up a book in a bookstore that changed my life. So the impacts on my life were liberations by and the seeing war, far too much that we should not have seen, feeling hunger, anxiety, and all of that. PTSD is still very much part of me. Got counseling for the inner child already when I was in my 50s. But still was wondering, already people said, oh, you're so successful, blah, blah, blah. I didn't feel that way. I was still wondering, who am I? And I picked up a book in a bookstore here. This is the actual book, Driven to Distraction, written by Dr. Hollowell, who's a medical doctor, professor, has ADHD and dyslexia. I still don't know why I picked it up. I wrote in the book, here it is. Now I finally know who I am. and I wrote it in Dutch because
Mm,
it was implied that it'd be potentially a stigma of mental disorder of some sort,
yep.
and I dated it. I wrote it in Dutch. I dated it January 1997. This is the actual book. Changed my life.
Wow.
Then I went to Google, started checking it out, and already then, 1997, I was 57 years old then already, and I want to, for 5 years I checked it out because I needed to know what it was and why, and then because I was building companies, go to the banks, make a proposal for financing in a lot of cases, and was successful in a lot of cases. But then at some point I had to indicate to a certain extent maybe, is that, by the way, I have also a mental disorder. And they would say, hey, have a nice day. So
Yeah.
obviously, and so it took me 5 years to go through Google and finding out about ADHD in particular. And so the more I saw of it, the more I believed, then it was different. So I went to my doc that delivered our two daughters, was a personal friend when I was 62. And he said to me, hey, John, why are you here? I said, I think I got ADHD. And we checked it out, and I do. And so, so there, can you believe it? At 62 years old, looking back to the time that I was 12 and a half,
Yeah.
50 years was wondering, who am I? The more I found out about it, though, the more I believe it has the potential, ADHD, of being a superpower. And that is exactly what it has been for me, because once I understood it better and found out more about it, I started writing. I was not a good reader, but I always was a good writer. I was always very good at numbers, but I was not good sitting in a classroom and just listening to somebody telling me things. If they would ask me, what did he talk about in the last hour? I have no idea, not a clue, because I lived in a different world. And so, but now I'm working on my sixth book. Obviously, I have 10 different companies. I'm a very active podcaster, and do presentations to high schools, colleges, universities, all over the place. And so that's kind of who I am and where I am. So it changed my life.
So amazing to hear you share about discovering this piece of yourself, this label, right? This medical diagnosis that's often classified as a disability to make sure people get this. But it really is a neurodevelopmental difference. And the systems you were born into and raised in weren't designed for the way your mind works. And you saw how limiting it felt. Just trying to sit in the back of a classroom and pay attention wasn't the environment that was easy for you to learn. But it's not that you can't learn and that you're not smart and can't do things. In fact, it's the very opposite, as evidenced by all the effort.
And
But
it
if we
was
put you in an environment,
interpreted that way, and I love teachers, and my youngest daughter is a teacher, and she's very, very good. So, but they simply did not understand neurodiversity is not only limited to ADHD, but others as well, as you know, and then the more I found out about it, the more I felt that I had an obligation to share at least my story with others. And I wrote a book about that part, ADHD Unlocked. And so the other part that I did that you may find interesting, Garrett, is that Dr. Hollowell, who wrote this book in 1993, has written 18 other books, 5 on distraction, has been a presenter all around the world, understood for that matter. You're my podcast number 503. My podcast 203 is with Dr. Hollowell. And
amazing.
can you believe it?
I love it.
And as we talked about ADHD in particular, because he's listened always to some of my podcasts are not only about ADHD, they're about all kinds of other stuff. But, so, and as we had a discussion, with Dr. Halliwell, I came to the conclusion initially ADHD may be 6 to 8%, 10% of the population, both male and female, although females portray it differently than males. But I came to the conclusion already on my own that was much higher. So I suggested to Dr. Halliwell, he's the expert, I just lived it and experienced it, and suggested to him that the frequency of occurrence probably is at least 20%. He said, no, John, it's more than 25%. And I agree with them. Now, the other part about it is that I've met a lot of very successful, and the operative is successful, entrepreneurs, business people, both male, female, as well, that have been very, very... I suggested to Dr. Halliwell that from my experience, I believe at least 50% of the successful entrepreneurs, business people, other people in being successful are ADHD. He said, no, John, probably 75%. And I agree with him. And so, so the podcast is for those people watching us from around the world. It's my podcast number 203, On the Brink, and with John A. Brink. And so Dr. Halliwell,
Yeah. And that idea of it being underdiagnosed and overdiagnosed at the same time is interesting, because it seems like there's a lot of people that aren't aware. I didn't find out that I had ADHD or that until I was in my 40s, like right on my 40th birthday when I got my first evaluation. So at 41, I'm there now being like, oh, okay, this is real. It, similar to you, I'm recontextualizing my whole academic career and my previous existence, and the ability to get so fascinated and passionate about so many different various things, but never having one thing that felt like the thing that needs to go.
And you know what is the interesting part, Garrett, is that in all the podcasting that I do, around the world, I believe that even on topics that are absolutely nothing to do with ADHD or neurodiversity issues, but just in a general sense, I may bring it up here and there. I believe 1 in 3 per persons that I podcast, ADHD.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So, and more, but male and female, although I'm not a doc or a specialist in it, just my opinion, females tend to portray it differently than males do. And it is now, for me, can you believe it, so that it took me 50 years from the time that I was 12 and a half, was looked at as somebody not very smart and bright and this is all by people. I'm not blaming anybody other than it was not understood then. And it took for me till the time I was 62, already successful in a lot of things that I did, but still wondering, who am I? Yeah. And so in a way, is this also one of the foundations of what you do in your, especially working with executives, founders, entrepreneurs, and all the elements that you have in this sustainable high performance without trading health or relationship, blah, blah, blah. All of that could well be written about me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially probably in your 40s, probably is when it started to really trying to figure out how to make it. And some projects go well, some don't, and trying to figure out how to lean into the ones that are doing well. It's really challenging for a lot of people to understand that what works for some people, and talked about a lot, when it doesn't work for them, it's easy for them to say to themselves, oh, I'm doing the thing that's supposed to work and it's not working. Okay, yeah. I must be the one that's broken. Yeah. It must be my fault. There must be something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And that's really challenging because it's easy to get that message from 12 or younger and carry it all the way through. But so the fact that you were able to get that book at that opportune time in your life and see like, no, wait, I'm not broken. I may be different and this system won't work for me, but that doesn't mean that I can't work or that I can't figure out how to.
And then the other part about it, Garrett, as you already indicated, quite in the latter part of life, and you already were in your 40s when you got diagnosed, is that, for me, it became the diagnosis is it unlocked all the other things. Then I had to learn to understand it, and then
Yeah.
knowing that I could be successful in a lot of areas, the key for me then is complementing the areas that were the weaker ones that I have with others, and that's what I do. And so, and what you may find interesting is that some of the companies I was looking for a management person in one of the companies that we have. I advertised them across Canada and indicated that the skill sets that we were looking for in the individual that would be applying, and added to the bottom, ADHD considered to be an asset.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, and I did not do that tongue in cheek. I was serious about it because
Yeah.
it's one part that I believe has complemented the things that I'm doing. And on the other hand, once we recognize it, then saying that the skill sets or that particular part of the individual that we bring in to our team, our management team in particular, must have strength and weaknesses maybe that complement the existing team as we go forward. And I'm even doing that now as we speak, looking at growing and further expansion, even at 85, like looking at Europe and being in meetings there next week for a week, and on other things, how can we grow even further with what we have, and expanding it in business things that we do. Not so much ADHD, that's just an additive, but simply what I'm saying, even at that point, is saying that most people say to me about the podcasting that I do and the books and then the companies and all those other things, say, when are you going to retire? I said, to do what? You know?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, when they go to their work, they're putting up with a lot of stuff that they don't appreciate or enjoy about their life. And they think, once I'm retired, once this is on the back burner, then I can go and do the things. But it seems like the way you've set up your life, you're living what you want every day.
And that's the point that I'm trying to make, right? So for you then in your specialty,
Yeah.
you should make sure that, have you got a contact point that people can contact you at if they feel, this is something that a person should be pursuing, male, female, as well. So give us your contact and your website.
Yeah. If someone wants to be really professional, they can follow me on the professional media, LinkedIn, or if they want to be more personal, they can follow me on Instagram. But it's Gnosis Therapy is my website, same as my LinkedIn handle and my Instagram.
Okay. And so you do it international and virtual?
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to have a couple clients in Asia right now, on the continent over there, and then also in the UK. So being here in North America, we can kind of finagle enough of the time zones to make it work pretty international.
Yeah, so where are you located, Garrett?
I'm in Southern California.
Southern California. And so so now what I find is that podcasting, if I look at the media and like your comments on those, is that in the years, I came from the time in, the being born in 1940 and in the early 50s. In the town that I lived, I still remember the first television set came in, and we all went down to watch. Some inside the store, standing outside of the store, tens of people watching, and we watched the television, and we saw all the snow, and say, there is somebody's moving, and looking, oh my God, and there's somebody else. It was amazing. And then the next thing was this small radios that we had, and transistor radios. I still remember those. And then obviously, when I already came to Canada in 1965, but in the early, late 70s, talking about computers potentially, and then Apple and Microsoft and all the other people were very progressive in starting with either data information or all the other things. And then Apple obviously was very progressive with Steve Jobs and creating the initial LISA computers and all the other things. And, so gone through that. The next thing was cell phones. Can you imagine, so I was in Holland, left Holland, sent telegrams back and forth and saying, I hope everybody's okay, I'm doing okay, found a job, $2 an hour, I'm all excited about it, and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And then eventually they sent something back where now we have a cell phone. It started out with the cell phone that were about this big, and now the smaller ones where it's virtually all the technology, and then obviously now transitioning into AI, but also talking about media in terms of, in a general sense, AI for the people watching us internationally, everybody's familiar, artificial intelligence, data related, all those kind of things. But then looking at all this stuff changing and in media is where the media viewership is going down, 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 further, further, further. And not only in the United States, as CNN, ABC, CNN, all of those in Canada, CBC, and Britain, and on Europe, BBC, blah, 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 all going down further. The media part that is evolving, at least in my mind, is podcasting. Like what we are doing, Garrett, never met you until now. Our conversation about all these things, already we have explored each other and know we have a lot of things in common. And so it will be watched from people around the world, not bragging about it. We well over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And then that means on the other platforms, probably another million and a half. So we could have in excess of 2 million people watching us around the world. And it's only on its infancy at this point. And it's still going further and further. And I believe that part is the future.
Absolutely. You think about the adoption curve of TVs through your lifetime, where media, watching the TV at the store, out there on the street where there was one not even in your home, and then it went one into a home and one into every room. And now people aren't watching it, watching their phones.
Exactly. And then AI is becoming more and more and more part of our lives. And some people think, the genie should go back in the bottle. It's not going to happen. It will be equally, if not more, part of our lives than computers were before. And saying, like, when I grew up, my grandparents had one radio, but they didn't have phones, they did not have televisions, obviously, all of those things, all in my generation.
Absolutely.
It makes one lifetime. It makes you then wonder, where do we go from here? What does it look like,
Yeah, what's another lifetime look like? It's quite a possibility.
Right? Yeah, and you and me could be still part of it, because it moves forward, saying, where is the next step?
Yeah. What does it look like?
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine. Yeah. I imagine that cell phones, telegrams, there's a 1-to-1 correlation there, right? It's the same message faster, sooner, but how much it impacts your life is amazing every day. Changes from that.
So going back to all of those individuals, including ourselves, that are watching all of these things unfolding, is your specialty attracting clients that trying to find a correct direction where stress is then taking over, which it could easily, and it starts affecting physical health, mental health, and subsequently performance, including relationships?
Absolutely. Yep. It's trying to figure out how we can mitigate the effects of that stress by giving them more of what they need. And the side effect of that is it makes you more adaptable to opportunities that show up, because you can be more present and not overwhelmed.
How does somebody, it takes some time, males are, correct me if I'm wrong, but are sometimes challenged in terms of saying, I don't want to get counseling or finding direction where somebody is correct. At what point, how do we motivate those clearly that are somebody in denial going into problems that go potentially from not being able to handle the things, going to stress that may go to abuse of drugs in some cases, or medication in the same way, or alcohol and all those things that then start affecting their jobs, their careers, their businesses, because once you lose direction or get buried, and then it will, which again is very important, start affecting relationships and all those things. How do you start it in terms of finding somebody, Garrett, I need help?
I think that you mentioned men having a hard time raising their hand and asking for help because it seems like in doing that, they're admitting something. Maybe they're not strong enough or man enough or whatever that theory or idea may be. But what's really interesting is you see a lot of men reaching out for podcasts where they're talking about these issues. You see them reaching out and looking for people that are talking about their very similar experiences. And so they're looking for help.
And
The resurgence of like philosophy and stoicism. Originally, philosophy was the study of science as well as the study of people, like psychology. And a lot of the ideas that people are learning about now from Aristotle and Marcus Aurelius to help them in their own betterment in life is actually psychology. It is help. And all of those stories are written in dialogue where it's two people going back and forth, sharing their frustrations, their concerns, and their ideas. And that model is still true. It's something that we're doing now, and it's something our listeners that are listening to the show are experiencing. But that is like a general version of it. When you go into a counseling office or meet with a professional, you're working very specifically. Instead of going this broad idea, we're going this part of this one part of this idea that shows up in this specific place of your life. Now we can provide even more resources to that one spot. And so it's almost like pressing fast forward.
yeah.
All of that.
So what I'm hearing, Garrett, and I use myself as an example of this, and I believe it is important for me to share that with others and encourage others to do that. So at one point with now my wife, been together for 42 years, we had difficulty and challenges, so we got counseling, which never comes all that easy, but it was helpful. But the counselor said at that point that to us, that he likes to have a discussion with me on my own because he sees something they call the inner child.
Yeah.
And those were experiences from the Second World War that were unresolved. And so we agreed together to do that. And so I got counseling for the inner child. And in my 50s, very, very emotional. I had no idea, and this comes to what you indicated, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, where starting with a discussion with somebody that had the foresight, but also the knowledge saying that I need help. And I admit that, because that's step one towards change. And then for you then and your specialty, identifying as the counselor did for us, that there are some underlying issues that are unresolved, and to focus on those, to identify it, that little boy within was still there.
Yep, and we carry it with us. Those experiences still live in us. We take them with us everywhere. And
Yeah.
they're there trying to protect us.
Right.
But you're not, 5 years old in that environment anymore. You're a different person. And so we have different coping strategies. But that part of us is still there. And sometimes when we get overwhelmed in the moment, it's easier to go back to that thing that worked.
So it makes me wonder then, Garrett, at this critical point in time, when there are so many challenges all around the world and all the things and political and blah, 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 all of that stuff. And, so what should we know in a general sense and saying, listening to our podcast where we've been both very open and frank about saying these are the issues that we challenged at the time and changed our lives as it did for you and me, then how do we then recognize it? And then it makes me wonder, recognizing neurodiversity issues is relatively new. The last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, we didn't even discuss it for all intents and purposes, where now it is become more accepted as something that's not necessarily a liability, but may first and foremost be something that we should recognize professionally, hopefully, in a way, and then from there and say, how can we make it work for us if it is issues like, in my case, the inner child is not something that came with me, but was developed during anxiety and trauma, could be a certain counseling and recognizing ADHD and some of the other diversity issues, neurodiversity issues are already part of, like, I am ADHD. I was born ADHD. I will likely die ADHD, and I love it since now I recognize it and it has become not a liability, but just the opposite, and saying that I feel I have an obligation to share with others, either through my books or presentations that I do in person or on my podcast when appropriate, to bring up those things and hopefully give encouragement to others, is saying it's not a liability. First and foremost, recognize it and then maybe get assistance to make it work in the environment that you are in. And for people that do not have it, the more you learn about ADHD, because you will have it in your environment. If it is not your family, then your friends and all the other things. Read a book, not only mine, but other ones, in particular, the one from Dr. Hollywell, and watch the podcast and make it work for you as an individual, so, and accept that's part of life, and maybe up to 30% of the population in a general sense globally have neurodiversity issues of some description.
Yeah. And I love what you said there. It's not necessarily a liability, but if we don't know it, we don't acknowledge it, we can't accommodate it, then when we just show up, it becomes challenging because we're unaware of these things that we need to be able to be okay. And the system that we're born into isn't necessarily designed for it. So it's interesting when people design for the mean, they design for the average, they kind of ostracize people on the other ends of those bell curves. But if instead we chose to design, environments, companies, organizations for the people on the edges of that, we would accommodate everybody in the middle. So it's interesting when we think about that. So if you're struggling, it may be something that makes you uniquely you and different, but the fact that it's a struggle for you is more about the environment and the lack of accommodations you have around you. And so as soon as we can acknowledge it, like you did with that book, you're like, this is me. This is what's been missing my whole life. Okay, now that I know that, how can I take this and make sure I can accommodate it? And then what happens? Way less effort, way more.
Exactly. And then the other part is that, again, respectfully, but the educational systems that I encountered in Holland and in other places in Europe, and then in Canada, I presume the same in the United States, has not adapted to issues being neurodiversity issues in the full scope that they can and must as they go forward in some form or fashion. And first and foremost, the earlier in life we get diagnosed, yours was quite late, mine was even later, being diagnosed as in 62, and unfortunately it changed things for the better for me, even still at that point, but it changed everything. It's very, very important. And then the other part, I wrote that in my book, actually, when I wrote it about my experience, was that after I wrote it, I felt there was something missing in my book. saying, okay, John, this is all very, very interesting and blah, blah, blah. I agree with all of that. But where do we go from here is the question that was missing. And so by coincidence, I met a fellow by the name of Tom Romer, who was the vice president academia for the British Columbia Institute of Technology, by pure coincidence. And I told him about the book, and he said, oh, interesting. We're working on something that's called micro-certification. And I said, bingo, I like that. So I again talked to him and asked him to add a little piece to my book. And basically the point is this one: if you go to school for 4 years, and we learn a whole lot of stuff which is interesting, but not necessarily to the brain of ADHD, so that blocks it out if it is not critical. So that the actual critical part that the person is going to the schooling or whatever it is to learn a profession or a skill set, it maybe only takes 6 months, and that would then be micro-certification of that particular critical element, and add the other things at some point later. I'm not saying the other parts are not important, but the first part is micro-certification. And then the other reason for it is that we have here in Canada, I believe in the United States is the same or will be the same, is we have a major shortage of skill sets. And they must be addressed in some form. This is one of the ways by changing, and it will take time because the educational system is so well established as it is, but we're starting to make some progress on it, but we have to go further, faster.
Absolutely. And some of those programs that I had access to when I was going through junior high and high school was workshop, home economics classes, where you're learning real tangible skills, wood shop. And you come out of that and you're like, cool, I made a bookshelf, right? But it'd be more interesting if instead of having a bookshelf, I had a market books to go out and actually maybe we could do some type of engineering, some type of electrical work, some type of plumbing, right? It would be interesting if that was something you came out of a class with after 2 years, in addition to some other schools. Because you might find some people that they're excelling, their academic career is much higher there than it would be in, advanced mathematics or something.
I agree.
But having opportunities for everybody, I think is
I agree with you. And then if I look back to my time as 12 and a half years old, when I initially became a furniture maker, that part served me well in the rest of my career, and so if I look back, all of that were learning steps along the way. And then I wrote another book about that, Against All Odds. And it's not about how successful John is, but more like all the ups and downs. So have you got anything, did you write anything at this point, Garrett, in terms of, because your topics are so critically important that people can get access to or read about?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that I do is experiential. So we get together and a lot of learning takes place when you go through something and you actually experience it. So like when you're sitting in a classroom and someone's talking about something, it's hard to get enough of your attention to stay with you. But if you're in an environment where you're doing something and someone's correcting something and you're learning how to do it, and it's this like trial and error process, that seems to be more effective at being able to make substantial, impactful changes for people. And so with the work that I do at this point, a lot of it is experiential. So people show up virtually or in person, and we do that together. So that way they can come through and actually experience the difference.
Right. Garrett, it was amazing. The hour went by far too quickly. We can keep talking. So it was an amazing podcast, Garrett. As I indicated to you earlier, the podcast will be unedited, and we will release it within 2 hours and be available to you and your guest, so. And then for all the people watching us, that if you like what we're doing, both for Garrett Wood and myself, subscribe to our podcast, like it if you like it, give suggestions if you have them, and share it with others, and very, very important, because it encourages us to do more of these type of podcasts as we go forward, and they are global and the issues are global. So Garrett, it was a privilege to have you on my podcast. Let's make sure we stay in touch.
Sounds good, John. Thanks for having me here.
Okay, thanks, Garrett. Take care.